if you're on the other side, looking through onto the oval, of course, they never put the blinds down there because it's just such a spectacular view. Looking over Centre Square, it will be pretty soon, or over the pitch as it is now, you pass the grandstands over to the hills. It's just a beautiful spot. And I sit in our oval prospect, we're at the home of the Roosters, trying to convince my fellow councillors and guests that it's exactly the same view in Prospect, just smaller. Then a plane flies overhead that's red and white, and I call it our sponsor's plane. We have a bit of fun. I'd just like to acknowledge too that we're on Ghana ground, and Ghana ground of significance. This is on the riverbank, and for the Ghana people, as you can imagine, being the only constant source of fresh water in South Australia, that's why I've chosen. It was a place for them of significance. They're often here. And if you've ever heard Uncle Lewis provide a welcome to country, he'll talk to you about the experiences of the Ghana people here, and it was very much a teaching space, a learning space, a place where they inspired not just their own young, but people who visited from other mobs about language and about astrology. The Ghana people were experts in astrology, and it all happened over here. So it's always a pleasure to speak from this location. You have a comprehensive bulletin briefing on me, so I won't go over too much of the history. Suffice to say, I've been around and done a fair bit, and I'm enormously grateful to the experiences I've had. What's not on there is that I had a nuclear family too, one of those ones that exploded. So I've got 5 parents, so as much as I've had a diverse experience in my professional career, I've had a very diverse experience in learning from parents, which is very handy. I always tell people who are just restricted with 2, I can pick and choose from 5. And the attributes that weren't very worthy, I could just leave them behind. I always found that pretty good too. So Port Pirie is where I grew up. I moved to Adelaide when I was 12. Grew up here. Moved to Wales for about 6 years in 89 to 95. Set up a branch office for the family firm. My grandfather started a food firm in Port Pirie in 1948. Used to ride to the job with a plank over his shoulder. It was one of the stories. Built up a brickyard, very entrepreneurial bloke, built up a brickyard, bought a second-hand brick-making plant, found a clay pit because bricks from Adelaide were too expensive. The roads were so bad, and at the time you got the bricks up from Adelaide, only half of them, when he built the other half, broke on the way up. And he turned on this brick-making plant, thought it was fantastic, and killed the whole electricity grid on that side of Port Pirie. I hadn't bothered to tell anybody that it drew a fair bit of juice. So we had to fix that, and went on and made roof tiles, packing crates for fruit and veg, joinery shop that made doors and windows, kitchens, professional joinery, and had 100 people on the payroll back in the 50s and 60s. My father took it over, and I worked for sort of a branch office in Wales when I was up there. Wales is a wonderful place, and that's where I joined the service club fraternity. I joined the Lions Club up there, as well as the parish council of St Vinny's. So apart from being head in school, that was sort of and involved in the Young Christian Workers Movement, that was my experience in service clubs, and it was a terrific experience, very welcoming people up there, the growlers, as I call the Lions. In terms of my professional experience, it's been in construction predominantly, a bit of youth work at the start, and that construction experience has involved me having my own landscaping business, my own building company, but I won too much work for the family company, so I had to kind of wind my operations down, and then moved into industrial and commercial construction, predominantly from about 92 or 91 in the steelworks in Whyalla, through to moving back to Adelaide and getting work with built environments, where I headed up their interiors division for 3 years before moving across into their work for the building division. Winning the old chapel stands, actually. You can say old, it wasn't that old. The stands just across the oval here was a huge win for built environments when I was there, because it meant that we defeated Boulderstones, and there's a bit of history there. The built environments guys came out of a Boulderstones background, so Baldies had their grip on the Adelaide Oval facilities. So defeating them was a huge psychological victory for my bosses, and so that was memorable. Unfortunately, I can't point at them anymore because they're gone. I then went to Badge Construction, so I was state manager there, and latterly ended up deciding I want to break from commercial construction and work for the Housing Trust for 4 years. And I have to say, of my recent time in construction, that was just wonderful. Wonderful place to be. Not because it's you turn up every day and someone gives you flowers and guides you to your beautiful desk overlooking a wonderful view, but because it's inspiring. It's enormously challenging. It's a place where you're confronted by difficulties every day. You're housing some of the people in our state who are the most vulnerable. You're housing people, for instance, the average tenant profile, despite what you might hear on some popular radio stations, the average tenant profile is an older single woman with a mobility issue. Okay? And likely it's not her and her former husband would have been workers but not owners of a house. He's passed away due to whatever it is, old age, working hard. She's left with no asset, and she's got a dodgy hip. That's a quite common profile for a housing trust tenant. And then you start thinking, well, how do we design houses for that sort of person? And those same houses can be used for someone who's got perhaps a disability that's more extreme of any age. And how do we design houses where people can age in place so they don't have to move from one place to the next as their mobility issues start to confront them more and more. We were lucky enough, I guess, in the downturn after the GFC to be part of the stimulus package. So my team, I was in charge of all the capital works projects there, so I know Charlie really well. We managed the $404 million stimulus project. So all of a sudden we're charged with, on top of our normal $60 million a year program, delivering another $404 million, another 1,475 houses right across the state, 25% in the country, our largest regional program for 20 years. And managing those all within a very tight 2.5-year time frame was an extraordinary challenge, and that's why I really loved that time. It was just brilliant. We won, I think last count, 37 awards for our work during that period. So, and for me, coming from the private sector and getting into the public sector, I thought I'd go and buy a brown cardigan and the leather patches, all those corduroy buttons and that sort of stuff. Well, I never got time. I never got time to put my feet on the desk. It's an environment of enormous change and enormous challenge. And you get involved not just in delivering projects, you get involved in setting policy and working out how does housing SA answer the needs of our community in the years ahead. And I feel enormously privileged to have been part of that organisation. A very challenging organisation, but very fulfilling. A couple of projects stood out to me in particular in that time. The first was the facility we built at Melrose Park. Just a set of 18 units, some two-storey, some single. This facility is near Castle Plaza. It is designed specifically for older homeless people. So these are people who have found it really, really tough to find a place, to be able to get private rental. There might be all sorts of reasons why that's the case. Maybe they can't get a bond. Maybe they're just not very stable in a house on their own. They need support every day just to make sure that bills are being paid and they are cleaning things and they are actually going shopping and buying reasonable food and their budget is under control. There are all sorts of reasons why people in our community need assistance, not always apparent, but there are all sorts of reasons. We built this facility specifically for people who are aged and homeless because we knew that they were vulnerable in the other types of accommodation where they had to share accommodation, and supported residential facilities are a commonplace. The old-fashioned boarding houses, which now often house people who are unable to get a private rental on their own. And I was delighted and saddened when I heard some of the stories about people moving in. One touched me in particular, and it was a woman who'd been living in her car for a long time, and just couldn't stick it at a house, and always just went back to living on the road. And we got her in there, and we contracted out the settlement process to Anglicare to help us. Anglicare or Salvos, I can't quite remember, it did change. And they gave her this unit, this downstairs unit, and she parked the car at the back because that was the one that you could put your car next to. She had all her belongings in her car. But for these people, that's all they've got is their car. And after a week, they come back every day, how are you going, how are you going? They noticed that the inside of the apartment's being used, but the bedroom looks pretty much sort of as it was. And they said, so how are you? How are you going with your new apartment? She says, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. How long can I stay? When are you taking it back? I said, we're not taking it back. This is yours. She said, oh. I said, where are you sleeping? Well, I'm in the car. Because I don't want to unpack it. Because I don't know how long I'll be here. This can't be for me. This can't be for me. Well, how amazing is it that there's a person who's been so fragile in her accommodation for so many years that she can't even believe what she's been given. This is a very simple unit. This is exposed bricks on the inside, just a Laminex kitchen. This is not fancy. And they settled her and got her moved out of her car into her bedroom, into her apartment. She's still there. And those stories really do touch you. You know, apartments is the other one I'm very proud of. The tallest, largest single project that the Housing Trust has ever built. It's in Weymouth Street. It's the first mixed occupancy apartment building to sell off the plan in Australia. It's 15 stories high. It's got a youth service across the front. In the tower behind is 116 apartments. Roughly a quarter retained for public housing. A quarter sold to people who earn less than $60,000 a year on an exclusive access kind of process, but they've sold to these people. A quarter sold to NRAS investors, so they're landlords who lease them out under the federal guidelines to people earning about 85 grand or so less a year, a discounted rent. And a quarter sold to the open market. Anybody could buy them. We mixed them all up inside the same building. We told people when they came to register their interest, we want you to have a look at the tenant profile on your floor. We thought, well, people are going to be a bit spooked by this, because we like to put our poor people somewhere else. We lost one sale, that's all. It was the fastest selling apartment building in the city in its time. The building was fully sold. We hardly discounted a thing. It was a huge success. That building alone has won 9 awards since its inception, including the Urban Development Institute of Australia's National Award for High Density Living. And I think it's a standout in just showing people that you can actually break through these paradigms. Apartments aren't just for students, they're not just for rich people. They're just another choice of how to live, and anybody can live in them. And we spend an enormous amount of time making internal spaces, places where you bump into and meet people and have a bit of the yak to them. And if you ever get a chance, get inside and have a look at it. So that's enough about me. I'm happy to chat afterwards if you want. But I wanted you to understand where I was coming from, the sort of things that interest me. And now I want to turn your attention to what's happening in the seat of Adelaide in particular, the seat that I'm running for the Labor Party. And I want to ask you what you think is important in this election with our city in particular. Because a square mile sits within the seat of Adelaide, and it always will. It always will. And when I ask people what they want for our city, you generally get a wide variety of responses. But I want to ask you this, you don't have to answer, it's not a survey I'm putting out there. I want you to think about what is the purpose of the city in your mind? How do you know when it's ticking the boxes? What should a city do? The city's not a suburb. The city is not an industrial area. The city is a construct of modern humanity. You can go back over civilization and find other examples, but cities have taken off in the last 2 centuries in particular. The cities that do well, thrive and prosper, understand what they're on about. And you just have to stop and think, what do we want out of our city? Because there's always a lot of talk about this and that, stadiums and bridges, important things. I put to you that our purpose of our city, its primary purpose, is to be the centre of commerce and wealth generation in our state. In a place that's complementary to the way we generate opportunity and wealth in our agricultural and aquacultural industries, in a similar way to the opportunities that are still unfolding in our resources and mining areas, but not the same. It is a place where people came together to do commerce in particular, and they wanted to be next to each other in that equation. The proximity matters. The banks wanted to be in that central hub. There are financial centres all around the world that are based on proximity, which is amazing. You think bank could be anywhere. Why does it matter? Lots of people in the building development chain work out of the city. The legal profession cluster around the courts. Lots of people who are entrepreneurs and business people want their offices in the city. Corporate headquarters put themselves with other corporate headquarters, and it happens here in our city. And why is that? Well, I contend it's because the relationships matter. People want to catch up with each other because you can't just do business in your own silo. The whole idea is that you're working across those networks. Your business will be better because of your interactions with others. So proximity in the city is a very important construct. That's why cities work. And when you forget that, when you think that cities are just shopping centres, you start to focus on things which are secondary at best, not primary. So when I look at a vision for our city, I look at what our natural advantages are, but I'm focused on saying to myself and to others, how do we take the next steps, not just one step, how do we take ourselves forward in in making our city the most prosperous place it can be. How do we generate jobs and wealth in our city, not someone else's? I've never been too distracted by other places I go and learn from them, but I don't want to mimic them. We are who we are. One natural advantage which I've been working on, I think quite successfully. We have 6 universities in our city now. When I was at uni, some time ago now I guess, there was one, Uni Adelaide, then Uni SA. Now Flinders Uni has moved into Victoria Square. Carnegie Mellon, University of London, Torrens University are there. 4 in Victoria Square, 2 in the Riverbank. All of them have 3 major streams of income. Students, overseas students, research grants. When you look at what they do with their research grants, they tend to be focused on international rankings. They tend to want to be published in Science and Nature and other publications to get their rankings up because the rankings attract overseas students. So it provides 2 outcomes. What I'd like to do, and I am doing, is talk to the universities about how they can take some of their research program and deal with the very clever people that do business between the Riverbank and Victoria Square, that are just walking distance, they're just across Flinders Street, they're just across North Terrace, and start to build that network. Remember that purpose of the city, that proximity, that networking opportunity. Break down those barriers. How would it be if in 10 years' time, our universities didn't actually sign off on their research grant application program in any year until they consulted their private sector board about what their private sector advisors told them they could commercialise? How good would it be that our universities were competing with each other for capital and for ideas and for clever people in our city? How good would it be that they commercialised half of the outcomes of their research and technology innovations that they already do right now? But they chose programs that had potential to be commercialised. Still looking at the rankings, but focusing on outcomes that we can commercialise. To me, it seems like a natural advantage. There aren't too many cities in the world that are as compact as ours and as walkable as ours. There aren't too many cities in the world that have 6 university campuses in that size city. For me, it's a natural advantage we should exploit, and we should exploit it well. The Samry building across here is a great example of how research how good architecture can inspire fantastic research. And that building is put there deliberately to make us all think that's about the future. And that future is supposed to be a better one. And if we get it right, people will bang down our door to get to those products and services that we've just developed in that Samry building. Well, I think we've got enormous potential well beyond that. 6 unis and a great commercial hub is part of that future. To touch on a couple other things before I finish up and invite some questions. One announcement we've made recently is regarding a new school in the city. This is something I've been passionate about for, I think, 7 years, last count. In Prospect, we've been zoned out of Adelaide High for over 20 years. The reason is Adelaide High is very popular. The boundary for zoning in is the parklands. We're zoned into a school, a brand new school, a terrific school, that's at Paraka. So our parents have been pushing for a long time, and I've joined that push. We've got Adelaide High expanded, it's now underway, another 250 places. We then pushed to get the zone boundary to be extended into Prospect. It is now extended for the first time in 20 years. Kids in Prospect have right of entry that can't be stopped into Adelaide High. They're delighted. The problem is, it's not a problem. We've got an abundance of fantastic private schools in the city and around, probably 8 or 9. There's only one public school. So then I've spoken to my mates and said, you've got to fix this. And of all the parties in the country, it should be us that fix it. And we should fix it well. So we've announced a second public high school, 1,000 students, which is about the average size of the schools that have enough capacity to offer a really good Year 12 program. We've announced that second school to be on about a third of the site of the Royal Adelaide Hospital, right next to the Botanic Gardens, so kids can study botany, with a zoo out the back, so kids can study zoology. Across the road from 2 universities, so you can have a shared science program. Down the street from South Australia's premier art gallery, museum and library. So you can have a cultural interface like no other school. I think it's a terrific location for a school, and I think in time it will become one of our state's favourite locations for a school. That will expand the school boundary, the zoning boundary, to include much of the inner north and the inner west. And now people are fighting about the edges of that. You know, the Broadview, Sefton Parks, they absolutely want to be part of the success of that school. When I speak to people like David Knox from Santos, he says we have to get more people into science. We need more graduates in science, not just engineering, not just geology, and we need more women graduates in science. So the school will have a specialisation in sciences and health sciences. And I'd like to have a specialisation in performing arts as well. In terms of the rest of our policy framework, this is the policy document we launched 2 weeks ago right here in the McGarry room. This is Labor's vast majority of our policies right here in this book. It's the first time I've ever seen all the policies published. What do you have a look at? At the beginning of a campaign, not dribbled out day by day, press release by press release. They're all there to have a look at. Now, I've only got my book, they're as rare as hen's teeth. But the website, you can have a look at. The website's easily searchable by just searching J for the number SA, J for SA, and you'll find all the content that you need. Just in closing, I think you can tell from my description of what I've been doing, and thank you, Heidi, for the description of what's happening in Prospects, which I didn't want to repeat, and my vision for the city, that I'm a bloke that likes to get things done. I didn't join council for a picnic. I didn't join it to make friends. I joined it to get things happening and to make things happen. And that's certainly my track record. I offer myself to those of you in the seat and those of you who are beyond to get into power, to make sure that the city keeps moving forward, that the buzz that has returned is taken forward, not just next year, but for many years, and we rediscover the purpose of our city and we pursue it as hard as we possibly can, and truly be one of the best cities in the world. Thank you very much.